I had to basically admit defeat on saying, if you do X, you must do Y. I found that I couldn't make people do it without making it really clear why these two things were required,
Mm,
why they were necessary.
yeah.
It felt like, as much as I felt like a robot asking people to do it over and over, what I was asking them to do was also very robotic. And I
Yes.
like, as much as I found resistance in myself to do this robotic work, I think they felt resistance on their end to
Yeah.
do something that felt like a machine could do this. A script could do this.
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to a new episode of the Refactoring Podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview a world class tech leader. Today's guest is Antonia Scheidel, who is Director of Engineering at Duolingo, where she made the whole career progression starting as a simple intern 12 years ago. Antonia is an expert at designing good, automated processes for your team, and that's what we explore today. We discussed how to create good automation to avoid people do glue work, how not to become a bottleneck as a manager, and how to make the team own the process and repair it when needed. So let's dive right into the action. Hey Antonia, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hey, Luca, it's so great to see you. Thank you for having me.
So, Antonia, you're a director of engineering at Duolingo, and I'll give a little bit of background. So, we met each other for the first time last June in London, where you did a fantastic talk about designing good processes for your team. And I loved your talk. It was very practical. And later we talked again, and I said, you need to come on the podcast to talk about this. And so here we are. So before we dive into the main topic for today, I love to start these interviews by asking guests about their journey and how they got into tech. So how was it for you, and was it your story?
Yeah, thank you. It's pretty funny. I'm a computational linguist by training. I got my bachelor's and my master's in computational linguistics. And people kept asking, like, is this like, do you learn about programming languages? What is this major
Yeah,
even about? And I kept saying, like, oh, don't worry, I can explain. You will work at the intersection of language and technology, but it felt pretty vague. Like, what
yeah,
does this even mean, right? And then I found out about Duolingo as I was wrapping up my master's. um, Luis, the founder, gave a TED talk, and I was like, wait, that's what that means. That is the intersection of
that's
language and
it.
technology. And I
Yeah.
started telling people, like, and if I'm really, really lucky, I might get to work for a company like Duolingo. And at some point, people were like, you need to stop talking about this and actually like send them an
And do
email.
it.
And I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in fact, you started working at Duolingo, and one thing that struck me about your journey is that nowadays people in tech jump from company to company, from between different jobs after many in a very few years. But you have done the full journey at Duolingo from joining as an intern to a director of engineering across 12-year time span. So. Tell me about it. How was it, and what have been the highlights and the tipping points of your journey at Duolingo?
Yeah, for sure. I think the main thing about Duolingo, and anytime, you talk to the people here, they'll tell you what's keeping them is the people. It's just a bunch of
Yeah,
really, really kind and smart people. Our founder likes to say that, oh, it's not just smart people, but they're kind as well. They're kind
yeah,
people, they're motivated by the mission. And I think everybody at Duolingo is really passionate about something. And some people like me are really into languages. Some people are really into theater. Some people are really accomplished musicians. I think it's just a bunch of people that care really deeply about something, and they bring that passion to what they do. And I think the fact that a lot of people have things outside of their work going on
yeah,
for them actually helps them bring like more energy to their job. So it's really, really good people. You're surrounded by people that are all sort of, in the same boat. They're all helping each other out. And we've done a lot to make it a better company to work for year after year. I remember when we were like a really small handful of engineers, and the founder was like, you and you're now senior engineers. And I was like, oh wow, is this how it works? Because we were all just like engineers. Um,
Yes.
and so I went to my manager, and like even managers were a brand new concept. And I said, okay, tell me, what can I do to become a senior engineer? And I remember he
Yeah.
told me, keep doing a good job. And I was like, wait, does this mean I'm doing a good job now? How can I tell? How can you tell? Like, how does any of this work? And, over the years, we've like started writing things down. It's become a lot clearer how to
Yeah.
have a good career at Duolingo, how to
Yeah.
grow. So, yeah, I don't know if that
Yeah.
answered your question.
No, totally, totally. And actually, it's funny because when I speak with people who have had long tenures and careers at the same company and ask them what made you stay at the company, the answer is always the people. Basically, I mean, you can, in theory, there are so many aspects, right? The mission, the technology that is interesting, you got paid well. There are so many things that go into the kind of decision, but ultimately, what keeps people like 10 years plus into some kind of venture is being surrounded by great people. That's always the answer. Um, Hey, before we continue, I want to tell you more about today's sponsor, which is Augment Code. Augment is the only AI coding platform built for real engineering teams, not to vibe code, but to make real progress. And that's because Augment truly understands your code base. It has a custom built context engine that takes into account every repo and every file in your stack, scaling nicely to tens of millions of lines of code. So it can actually help to write functions, fix CI/CD issues, triage incidents, and review PRs, all from your IDE or from your terminal. Learn more on augmentcode.com. And so for many that I also speak with that got to director leadership positions, one of the tipping points in their career that they will always remember is when they got from being an individual contributor, so an engineer or senior engineer, into management. So
Mhm.
how was it for you? Was it hard? Was it something that you envisioned because you really wanted to become a manager? How was it for you?
Yeah, so I had been a tech lead on a couple of teams, so I helped, streamline certain things, sort of saw myself as like the, like the right hand of the team lead. When they were in meetings, I would make sure that things were working well. But then that team lead that I was the sort of on the ground person for said, "Hey, I am moving on to a different role. Would you be open to taking over the job?" And so it was never
Mm,
really a decision for management or, hey, I really want to be a team lead. It's that somebody that I've really admired asked me if I would do their job, if I would, you know, train and sort of ramp myself up to being able to do their job. And so I remember two things. One, that it felt like such a big honor, like to step in the shoes of somebody that I admired, but also that feeling of it's not my job to help people. And I had
mm,
struggled with that before because I thought, oh, all this like streamlining work, that's not really engineering. It's not the really hard hitting
yeah.
stuff. And talking to people was something that I really enjoyed. And I had done a lot of mentoring and things like that. And suddenly, in the midst of COVID, no less, my job became talking to people and my job became helping people out. And it turned from don't over index too much on this stuff to no, this is now your job. If you are good at
Yeah.
this, the team will actually benefit from it. So that was really transformational to go from, oh, it's just a thing that I do on the side to no, actually, this is a skill that we value and it's a skill that we want
Yeah.
you to develop.
Yeah, love it. And so basically it was a gradual process. I mean, you were able to
Yes.
kind of preview what your life would be like as a full-time manager while you were still in your previous role in a way.
Sort of, yeah. I got a really clear view of what my manager was doing as a tech lead
Yeah.
because I was already on the team I was helping out, and so I had sort of I had a really clear role model to follow.
Yeah, and that totally helps. So the main reason we got to talk the first time, and then we started with the idea of having this conversation, is that I think you brought a great insights about how to build good processes for your team. And as you told about your story, this is something that you have been thinking about for a long time, even before your times as a director and so on. And one of the things that I think worked very well in your talk is that you brought a great case study about a process that I think it will feel familiar to most. That is having engineers write notes about some kind of weekly sync or review or planning process. That is something we all struggle with, right? So can you walk me through this example and what you were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, for sure. So, for context, the team that I was running when this all started is the retention team at Duolingo. If you're familiar with Duolingo, the app, we're the team that owns the street mechanic. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the most visible features in the app. It's something that we've iterated on endlessly, like 600 plus experiments on in this sort of realm. We're one of the teams that runs the most kind of optimization experiments because it's a
Yeah.
feature that works, and when something works, we double down on it. So a lot of processes that Duolingo had were starting to hit sort of a scaling wall for our team because we were just running so many experiments that you couldn't keep it all in your head what was happening there, right? Like if our area leads asked us for an update, like, hey, what experiments do you have coming up? Other teams might say, we've got experiment A, B, and C, and we'd say, well, we've got a dozen.
Yeah.
And at that number, you just can't keep it all in your head. And so it was a lot of going to each engineer saying, like, hey, what's the status for this project? Do you think we'll have it in this upcoming release, or is it going to be in the release after that? And
Yeah.
so when you have 12 experiments, it's 12 conversations, and
Yeah.
it's estimation is a really hard skill, and so many things get in the way. So you really need to be asking all the time, like, hey, what's the status now? What's the status now? And in theory, we had a project management system. We were using Jira, but the reality and Jira were sort of drifting apart. There wasn't really an incentive for the engineers to be really bought into this project management system because they were just
Yeah.
getting their work done, right? Like that's sort of the
Yes.
vision. You're getting your work done, and then somebody keeps nagging you and it's like, can you update the system, please? And
Yeah.
I found myself, because I had built a system that would like I had written a script that would pull from Jira and like write up a summary for me so I didn't have to like manually copy and paste stuff.
Yes.
But I found that the script was pulling incorrect information from Jira because people had updated it, once a couple of weeks ago. And then when timelines had shifted, they were like, well, my timeline has shifted. Now I need to really concentrate on the work. I have even less time for your shenanigans over there with your project management system. And
Yeah.
so I'm over here trying to generate these updates for my stakeholders. The engineers are just trying to get their work done. And we had this like gulf opening up between what I could see in my system and what was really happening. And the only way
Yeah.
to get up to date information was to keep bothering people and keep interrupting
Yeah.
their process and keep interrupting their flow to get that information. And it was frustrating for me. It was frustrating for them. It's not
Yeah.
sustainable.
And I think this story is, first of all, it's very reassuring to me because I've lived through similar things like in my previous companies, and you always have this kind of uh, shame feeling that you see that the tool doesn't get updated or does not align with what people do, and you feel like you're not good enough at managing things, and you wonder why this thing's happening, and you believe maybe for sure in the good companies this stuff doesn't happen, right? The tools are updated all the time. One is that it feels like it's a natural fact of life that at some point your Jira tickets or your linear tasks or whatever are not perfectly aligned with reality. So, I mean, do you think that when you're thinking about process, you have to account for that because it's inevitable, or that's the problem? So it's the process that has to adapt to the misalignment that will always be there, or you have to fix the misalignment up front?
I mean, before I adjusted the process, I tried literally everything else. So I
Yeah.
feel like I have, in my case at least, I have the evidence that the process was the only thing that could adapt. Because I tried gentle reminders, I tried, like, oh my God, can you just please do it? I tried sort of these like harried reminders. I tried, do you need me to sit you down and explain this to you? Is there something that's unclear? And people are like, no, like, I get it. Like, it's not like a lack of comprehension, right? I tried
Yeah.
explaining it. I tried so many things. I was like, do I need to, like, do people just not respect me as a manager? Do I need to put in their performance review
Yeah.
that they're not keeping
Yeah.
the JIRA up to date? And that just felt like such a petty thing to call out. And it just felt like, no, I don't think I need, like, I can get anything done if I just say, like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
putting my foot down. You must do it. Because I got pretty close to that and people still didn't do it. So I sat down and I was like, okay, what am I actually asking people to do? And I know we'll get to that, but I had to I had to basically admit defeat on saying, if you do X, you must do Y. I found that I couldn't make people do it without making it really clear why these two things were required,
Mm,
why they were necessary.
yeah.
It felt like, as much as I felt like a robot asking people to do it over and over, what I was asking them to do was also very robotic. And I,
Yes.
like, as much as I found resistance in myself to do this robotic work, I think they felt resistance on their end to
Yeah.
do something that felt like a machine could do this, a script could do
Yeah.
this.
I think that's a great insight. So basically going make one step back and thinking, why are people not doing that? I mean, there's we all do our best at work, so there should be reasons, right? And I think you hinted at least a couple. I mean, one is they don't think it's valuable. To they think it's bad work, it's robotic work that can be automated, and so there is resistance even in that. Am I right?
Yes, yes, I think that's right. Because there's the whole reason I kept asking them was that I wanted to spend my time differently from just like spending 3 hours every week writing up a status update for my stakeholders. You know, the
Yeah.
motivation on my end was already resistance against resist right, and sort of my motivation to even ask them all of those questions was that, you know, that I was resistant to do this repetitive work. And so, you know, like I think at some point there was a disconnect in my desire to not do the repetitive work, but not seeing that I was asking other people to do that kind of work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think I mean, the problem with asking other people, I mean, at least that's how it was for me. So that's my premise. My problem with asking other people to do this kind of work over and over is that it's not much that I spend a lot of time doing that. I mean, it's also that, but it's that it feels like emotionally intense. You know, I mean, there are people who are maybe more comfortable with this, but I'm not 100% comfortable going after people asking them these, petty things. And I'm wondering what people may think about me that I'm asking this stuff. And it feels like heavy, even if it takes like 10 seconds to ask on Slack, in a way that it's hard to articulate, but it's a heaviness that it's there. I don't know how to say.
Yes. No, I'm so glad you framed it like that. It's a heaviness, right? It is
Yeah.
a thing that weighs you down, and I felt weighed down by it. I kept looking in the mirror, going like, like have I become their mother? Like, what is going on? Like, nobody wants this. I don't want to be like, I've asked you 10 times already. Why aren't you doing the thing? Like, I didn't want that, and they didn't want me. You know, they didn't like. I felt like I've reached the point where every message that comes from me, my engineers are probably going, what is it now
Oh,
about the process? Was it a
yeah,
now about
yeah.
the project management
Oh
system?
my
It's like,
gosh.
it's not why I was put in this role, right? Like, when my manager asked me to take over the team, it wasn't because like he needed somebody to keep the
Yeah.
Jira running, right? So it's
Yes,
like,
exactly.
you're like, oh, I thought this role change, I thought this promotion was about acknowledging what I do well. but I'm
Yes.
failing at getting people to do these really simple housekeeping tasks. How did we end up in this world? So
Yeah.
that was really confusing.
Can totally relate. So my necessary follow-up question is, how did you get out of this?
Yes, that's very fair. So, one of the things is that I kind of had to get out of it because because I was going on sabbatical. So Duolingo offers a 2-month sabbatical for folks that hit 10 years of tenure. So this happened about 2 years ago. I was preparing for my sabbatical. I was doing, I was handing tasks off. I was doing all this prep work to make sure everybody was set up for success while I was gone. And I think I sort of took stock of the tasks that I was hoping others would take over for me. And I thought, these look bad. Like, there is no way to look at this stuff that I'm doing and go, yes, enthusiastically, this is a development opportunity for somebody else, right? Like
Yes.
we talk about like, oh, something that might be a chore to you could be like a stretch
Yes.
opportunity for somebody else. Asking somebody like,
No.
hey, has this timeline shifted? Can you update the system? Nobody's really growing from that, right? Like,
I
so
th-
you're
I mean, I'm putting myself in your shoes. I think if it was me, the only thing that looks worse than doing this myself is asking others to do
yes,
that
yes,
on my behalf. I mean,
yes, exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Um, and I think I had this vision, and I think I took it out of my LDX slides, but I for the longest time I had this like vision of this. There's this meme of the silent protector, like somebody who's sort
yeah,
of like shielding the sleeping child in the bed, and it's like, oh,
yes, yes.
I'm being hit by all these missiles, and I'm taking, making the sacrifice. I was like, yeah, that's fine if it's a worthy cause, but it felt like,
It
asking
doesn't
somebody
feel
to
that.
do this work, it's just it doesn't feel worthwhile when you ask somebody else. And the other thing was that I felt like I had to do a lot of explaining to the folks that were filling in for me to even make them understand that I was doing it and why I was doing it and what the consequences were. And one of the things that I realized is I was doing a whole lot of stuff in silence, sort of behind the scenes, because when I got sick of asking people, and I think that's really where things turned. When I got sick of asking people, I
I
started
know
just
where
correcting
you're
for it.
going. Yes,
You just do it
yes,
yourself, right? Like when asking for the 10th time, it's just you just can't bring yourself to doing it. You
yes,
just do it yourself. It's only going to take you a couple of seconds.
yes. It's the spiral. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. I was doing updates myself. I might check in with people and what they told me or what I could observe from other data sources. Like I would populate in the system. If the script that was pulling from our system got things wrong, I was spending a lot of time sort of post-processing, making sure that everything looked all right. If people had forgotten to include information, I would like go and look it up,
yeah,
right? So there was a lot of this sort of invisible work that, like you said, the only thing worse than doing it myself would have been to ask somebody else to do it for me. And so that's kind of
yeah.
where that shift came.
Yeah, and so I think that this idea of the sabbatical acted as a forcing function to to get out of this and try to make things better, if not for yourself, for those who come after,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, it just I think that's so often what motivates us to take action. It's like we're willing to make the sacrifice, but we wouldn't wish it on anyone else. So,
it's true.
what I what I ended up doing, if you want me to like dive right in,
Yes, yes, yes,
so
sure.
what I was looking at was sort of we've been talking about like, oh, there's this unpleasant task that is being done for you by a script or by a system, but we're not going into a ton of detail what the actual task is. So basically, we have Duolingo runs a ton of experiments. My team, like I said, ran more than most in the company, and so we have these A/B tests that we're running a couple. a couple to a dozen a week, and they go through this life cycle, right? Like you get approval to run the experiment, you spec it out, you implement it, you at some point you actually run the experiment. And what was happening was that to make the most use of our project management system, we would sort of, make sure that the project management system represented the status of the like where in the life cycle each experiment was. So if the experiment was going into development, the engineer would say, hey, it's going into development now, and I think it'll be done at this moment. And then, they'd make another update to say it's now done. I've now implemented the experiment. It's now rolling out. It's now rolled out. Now it's launched. We've made a decision. These are the next steps, right? So like it goes down this life cycle of each experiment. And what I found was that a lot of times the ask for the engineers was go to another system where you've just made a change and then take the status and like replicate it in our project management system.
Yeah.
Because these experiments are like, we have an internal metrics and experimentation system, and the experiments are created in that ecosystem. People create the experiment, they hit a button to run it, they hit a button to launch it. And what I was saying was basically, you, a human with a rich inner life, once you hit that button to run the experiment, go to Jira and hit a button that says this experiment is now running. And once you hit a button in the system that says this experiment is now launched, then go to Jira and say it's now launched. And I
Yeah.
thought, okay, I really am just asking people to like copy information from one place to the other. Is there a way to not do that? To really examine in our process, what are the things that really are taking information from people's heads that exist nowhere else? And can we focus just on those? And so one of the things that I did early on was sort of hook up the project management system to the system that was already in place and say, okay, if there is another source of truth, let's just read from that source of truth. Let's not ask humans to
Yeah.
copy from one place to the other. And it really helped us zoom in on just the parts that, you know, these really only exist in people's heads. And usually that's the estimation piece. That's the estimated time of delivery, which release are you targeting? And that information was important for our stakeholders, both up, but also like around the team. Other roles like our QA team needed to know, when is this experiment going to be ready for testing, all of these things, right? Like anytime the estimated delivery changes, that's when action is taken in a bunch of other places. And that's the only thing that only the engineers knew, right?
Yeah.
Which when they were going to be done with the work. And so that was sort of the journey to really pare the process down, to read, to do more work behind the scenes in an automated fashion, to pull from
Yeah.
other sources of truth. And only when the source of truth is somebody's head, then have the process there to get that
Yeah.
information out.
Love this. So my question about this approach, because while you speak, I'm basically reliving my own struggles about similar processes. So I think there is like a sneaky trade-off in creating more automation between tools. That is, you're removing manual work, but maybe these sources are not always 100% reliable, right? I don't know, there are false alarms. I mean, a status changes or does not change, but something happens anyway. Systems are hooked up and some notifications are fired the wrong way, and they say something has happened that instead it has not happened. I
Yeah.
mean, does it happen to you, or was it like perfect connection and perfect status all the time?
It was perfect all the time.
Yes.
No,
Okay. The
it's
interview is
no.
over. Yes. We are done.
No, so I no, I wish I could say that. There is a piece where I'm sort of exploiting notifications going off prematurely for I think a worthy cause. But um, let me like actually dig in, because part of it for a long time was that we were populating information in a system, and then I was using the system to populate my weekly updates for my stakeholders.
Okay.
So for the most part, those like that information was still getting, sense checked by me. I was still going through it and I was fixing mistakes as they came up. But one thing that we changed, and that was actually a really good change, made it so that we did fire off notifications when we hit a certain point in the system. And that helped make it stronger and more robust, I think. So
Hmm.
before it was going, like, it was made basically for the consumption of one person, me, and then eventually the stakeholders, but it was still sort of passing through a human filter. But we implemented a thing where we said, okay, you're an engineer, you committed to shipping this experiment or being ready with your implementation by this time. Just as much as I was using all this aggregate information to update my stakeholders, we were starting to look into what can we do to update the engineers' stakeholders because they have them too,
Hmm.
right? And so one
Yeah.
of the things that we did was we let the designers know when a feature made it into the app because the designers would often they would create something, they would hand off a design to engineering, and then a couple weeks later the feature would actually be in the app. And it's a really important sort of last line of defense for the designers to look at their feature in the actual app and say, yep, this checks out, this is what I intended, or hey, actually this is not what I thought it should look like in dark mode on a really small device or something, right? Like they might still find something that needs a tweak. And so we said, okay, engineers, whenever the app release is cut that you indicated will have your feature in it, we'll let your designer know to keep an eye out for that feature.
Yeah.
Because, you know, an engineer might not think of it. And again, this information is out there. We can just use what's already in the system to trigger this update. And then what happened was that occasionally an update would go out, and in a Slack channel, it would say, like, hey, designer, this engineer has now implemented your feature. Look for it in the app. But sometimes it wouldn't be in the
It's
app.
not there.
Right.
Yes.
Sometimes it's not there because the estimate changed, the delivery date changed. But what was really, really important about the step was that now it's not, oh, Antonia needs to go in and fix the thing. It was the designer and the engineer are tagged. It's now really easy for
Mm.
the engineer to say, hey, sorry, designer, we're pushing this back a week, right? It
Yeah.
brought the engineers into the conversation and it brought the engineers closer to the process, basically.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't, it's really hard for me as a manager to go in and say, look how much work I had to do to keep the area lead who's 2 levels removed from you up to date on this thing. They're like, isn't that your job? Right. So,
Yes.
uh, so I think it was helpful.
Fair. Yeah.
So I think it was really helpful to say, hey, there are other downstream processes, right? Like it's a lot easier to say like, hey, here's a really clear cause and effect. If you update the system and then don't update it when the plans change, then according to the original plans, actions will be taken. And those actions might be, we'll
Yes.
let your design stakeholders know, or we'll let QA know your feature is ready. And so that made it a lot more transparent, I think, for engineers to see, oh, this is what happens with the information I put in. I'm not just putting it into a black hole, it actually is being used, and I know exactly how.
Yeah. What I love about this, and I mean, what I'm hearing is that not only it's obviously good to make parts of a process like transparent and more visible to the various stakeholders, especially in an automated way, but it is even more effective when you're able to kind of communicate well where ownership is and keep making people in the loop so that in a distributed way there's this kind of healing when things go wrong that happens through the people, the true owners of the things that get done, instead of becoming, gate kept by the managers in a way
Yes,
that they find themselves babysitting the process basically.
that's right. That's exactly right. And I think we found this especially with our more junior engineers. Duolingo hires a ton of new grads that are straight out of college. This might be their first job. And so some of them are still in that school mindset where they're like, oh, I'm just going to get a lower grade for this, right? Like, I
Yeah.
won't get a perfect score. I won't get a perfect score if the system's not up to date, but I'm willing to take that risk, right?
Yeah.
And I think the system was helpful in saying, in making it more visible, no, actually, I don't care about how long you take. I care about being able to plan around how long it takes, right? Like
Yeah.
within reason. I really don't care, right? The deadlines are just there so others know, how to structure their week, and so others know, how to plan around it. And so one of the things we find ourselves doing as managers, especially of more junior engineers, is really helping them understand, no, you're a part of a bigger system. Let me show you
Yeah.
all the components of the system. And, in the case of that notification, it was really easy to say, like, hey, uh, we had to push this back. Let me update the system real quick so that
Yeah.
a week from now, when that notification goes out, it will actually be right. And you will be able to test your future.
Yeah, I think notifications, even though are, when you think about it, they're a small thing, right? But they make people think this is a system, right?
Yeah.
That where there are things that
Yes.
happen automatically, and I think it's easier for them to feel this kind of, especially for us engineers, to think that you have this responsibility to keep things clean and moving,
Yeah.
because there are automated things happening, as opposed to you have DMs and people asking you to do stuff. I think it's a different feeling, and if whatever small, but I think it makes a difference in how people think about all these moving parts.
Yes. Yes, you're completely right. It's the taking responsibility bit that I think that contributed to how heavy and how painful it felt before, because it felt like, I'm asking you to do this. Why are you not doing it for me? And I think a lot of people are like, well, why should I be doing it for you? Like,
Yeah.
you're a perfectly capable manager. Who knows what your job is, but like that is probably your job. So like just do the thing.
Yes.
But once the process started appearing in a more visual way, and the process started appearing and like chiming up and being like, here's something that didn't work quite
Yeah.
well, or here I'm going to send this message. Suddenly it goes from, well, Antonia can look after herself, to, oh wow, there's this process, it's automated, it's really dumb. Like, we understand how automated systems work. They're not
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
We need to help them like do the thing. And I think in my talk I was like, I kind of wanted the process to feel like the classroom pet. Like
Yeah.
it's there. You kind of know how to take care of it, and it's a shared responsibility to take care of it and feed it and do all the
Yeah.
things.
No, it's true. It's true. It changes how your perception, I think, about the whole system. So I have like very practical questions about how to do notifications right, because I think it's one of those topics where everybody agrees, that we have to have more visibility, more notifications. But then I don't think it's so easy. First of all, would you tag people in notifications to inform them you have to do this or this is happening? I mean, would you tag direct people involved in the things?
Yes, we iterated on this a little bit, and initially it was all on the Jira ticket, but
Yeah.
these like, hey designer, this ticket is ready, or this feature is now in the app. We would tag the designer directly, and we would tag the
Mm,
engineer directly, so they would see it as a mention. It would not go through like a Slack bot notification, because I think we all
yeah.
get, at least five of them in a day telling us to
Yeah.
do things, and they're very easy to ignore. So
Yeah.
having two people tagged in it, I think reinforced
The
we're just
responsibility.
enabling the responsibility. You don't have
Yeah.
a responsibility to the process, you have a responsibility to your designer.
Yeah. Love this.
There's
Two people tagged in a public notifications. And so that means, if the notification is somehow broken, it falls up because of a ghost status update, something that never doesn't really happen, the people tagged feel the responsibility. They have to fix it. It's kind of their job, right?
right.
That's the idea.
And yes, yes, for sure. And of course, because like very obviously the system didn't always work perfectly, um, even if statuses were always correct. Of course the pressure is now on me as well to make that process work, right? Like
Yeah.
if I don't want people to put ghost updates in there, I had to make sure that, whatever went wrong with my processes and my notifications, it was like, okay, I need to be on this, even though this is a little bit of a side project.
Yeah.
Not giving false alarms and not freaking people out is now like a top priority. So, I had to
Yeah.
make sure I cleared time for that if I had to.
Yeah. So, another question that I have is that we have discussed like one common, let's say, failure mode that is the notification fires up for something that is not correct. Like, but there is also, I think, another failure mode that is something happened, but nobody has updated anything, or I mean, the nothing happens when it says something should happen. There is some information that doesn't get entered in the system. There are some incomplete tickets, not valid info. I mean, do you use notification also to tell people, hey, this looks wrong, right? Or I know that the deadline is passed maybe and nothing has been shipped. What is
Right.
happening? Yeah. Do you also have some of these?
Yes, if I understand the question right, sort of like even if people are sort of there's a failure mode where the information is incorrect, and then there's sort of user error in a complex
Yeah.
system. And in our case, this sounds really this sounds so like nitty gritty, but we cut a new release
Go
on
for it.
Wednesday, right? Like we cut a
Okay.
new release on Wednesday, and we've decided this is the arrangement. If you say you're going to ship a feature for the release that is cut on Wednesday, I need you to set your due date to be Wednesday. And so I have like a little automation in there that says if your due date is a Tuesday, I'm going to send you a notification privately
Yes.
to
That's
say,
what I meant.
hey, your due date should be a Wednesday. It's a Tuesday. And these sound completely like, zooming out, I fully understand that. This sounds completely bonkers. Like, why would you get a note? Like, why would you tell somebody who's like, extremely qualified at their job, like, no, it has to be Tuesday. It can't be like, oh, it has to be Wednesday. It can't be Tuesday. Like, that sounds so silly. But there's just other stuff that's built on top of it that will not work if the due date isn't a Wednesday. So
Yeah.
we set up a thing that basically privately messages the person who set the wrong due date or who like
Mm,
used the process wrong. There's a private message as close to when the wrong usage occurs. There's a private message that is then followed up the next day by a message in the team channel. And this is not
yeah.
public, like it's not blasted to hundreds of people, but within the team, there is a message that goes out and it will say something like, hey, at engineer, your due date is set to your Tuesday, should really be a Wednesday. Other automations will fail if it does. And sometimes it's a message for not the engineer, but for the product manager. Like, hey, product manager, you forgot to put the spec in there, or you
Yeah.
didn't put your estimated impact in there. And then it will tag the PM and the engineer because, again, the responsibility is ideally towards each other, not towards the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So there is this sort of loop of flagging wrong usage of the process. And
Yeah. It's kind
this
of
is something,
linting, for
it's
the,
lit.
for,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
exactly.
for
That's
the process steps.
exactly. That's how I thought of it. I was like, well, it's not, no human code reviewer says like, hey, you should be using spaces instead of tabs or use single quotes here, right? Like this is just like, oh, we've agreed to do it a certain way. It doesn't matter if it's silly, but that's what we've
Yeah.
agreed on. And so you have a
Yeah.
linter that takes care of telling you. And so that's how I thought of those notifications. It's really basically a process
I love
linter.
the mental model. I mean, this is the nitty gritty that should not be called out by human, but should
Yeah.
be enforced by a system,
Yes.
ideally. And I love also what you said, that in some cases, like the first warning, if I got it right, it's private. You get a DM, but the notification, and second warning, you get the tag on the public channel. I mean, is that right? I mean, was that the idea that first
It's
it's just a
yeah.
nudge and then it's a little bit more? Yeah,
Right. It's like, oh, you didn't feed the hamster. I don't know. No, the so it's not publicly blasted to the company, but we have a private team channel that we use to coordinate, like, hey, a team meeting has moved from this room to another room, like that level of comms, or like
yeah,
if it's this person's birthday. Um, those notifications go there and they say like, hey, so and so, can you set the due date to a Tuesday? And I will say there's a really fine line here where you can tolerate maybe 5 of those notifications at most in a day. Ideally,
yeah,
it's 1 or 2, because if it's any more than that, you still develop a blindness for it, even if you're tagged, even if
mm,
it's in your team channel. And so, I think that's where I have to be honest and say, like, yes, the process helped a ton and the accountability helped a ton. But also, when I found that somebody was tagged a second time or a
yeah,
third time in a row, I would go to them and privately say, like, hey, this should take you 10 seconds to fix. Could you do that? Because we're, we're spamming the channel. We're spamming the channel where people are having other types of
yeah,
conversations. So, like, you really want to keep it's sort of a broken windows thing, right? Like, once you see people ignore those reminders, it's easier for others to ignore.
yeah,
And sort of
it's
the
true.
other way around, if you see, oh, none of my teammates are getting double reminders, right? Like, none of my teammates are getting
Yes,
reminders consecutive days in a row. Then I better jump to it too.
yeah,
And so I think I'm currently working with a coworker who's looking to adapt the system on her team. And we created a staging channel for those reminders to make sure that we could get them, we could get the team to,
yeah,
95% compliance with the process, and
yeah,
only then start actually reminding people. Because if you go too hard and if you say like, oh, here's 100 things that need to be fixed, it might
yeah.
as well
There's a
be a
balance to be
trillion,
found.
right? Like, you're not gonna do
Yeah.
anything about it.
So I have a very specific question about something you said before, because you said if notifications get ignored constantly, uh, it is a bad outlook, for others that they feel like notifications are ignored, and so they may ignore them as well. But does it mean that you have notifications in the same channels where you have conversations, or do you create channels that are dedicated only for notifications? I mean, this is super tactical, but I want to know.
Yeah, I had my my team lead that I handed the team and the process off to about 2 months ago. He came to me and he said, "Hey, we find that these are getting a little spammy. We're trying to have a conversation in this channel. Would you mind if we move them to a channel that's dedicated for notifications?" And I said, "Hey, I'm working on this talk for this conference about our process, and the visibility, the transparency are actually really important, I think, and
Yeah,
so is the social accountability. And so I think if you put them in a place where only those reminders are going, then that entire space is easy to ignore.
yeah,
Then they might as well be
I agree.
DMs. Then they might as well be like bot reminders. So I said, I know this is more work, but can we try and find out if people are, if there is one person that we need to remind how this works? Or can we explore in the process like some other follow up? What if you considered it a forcing function that these reminders need to be well behaved guests in a channel where other stuff is happening, rather than saying, oh, these are so poorly behaved, we're going to stick them in a channel all by themselves?
Yeah, I think that's some wisdom here. I mean, I agree, because it feels so natural to have channels that are only dedicated to those to notifications. But I agree that it kind of defeats the purpose, especially if if it's about accountability and visibility across the team. So yeah, I agree. And I also wanted to ask because um, something that I'm thinking is we started with a very painful example where the manual process is obviously dragging you down or dragging the team down. And of course, you think you have to automate, we have to automate this, but we have to find the right way. But there are, in my experience, sneaker examples where it's unclear whether it's worth it or not to automate something, especially when it's on you and it takes, 3 minutes every couple of days. Aside from, as we know, the emotional heaviness. But sometimes, I mean, at least I found myself thinking it's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
Because too much work for too little ROI. But
Yeah.
how do you talk yourself out of this mindset when I mean, in your right mind, that in the long term, the right thing to do is to automate the process, but it's your laziness that speaks more likely. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if it's laziness, honestly, because I think a lot of companies would, this is maybe controversial, but I think if we were all lazier, if we were all less willing to sacrifice our happiness, our sleep, our work-life
Mm,
balance, we would invest more in processes that do the work for you. So I think sometimes it's like saying, "Oh, I'm not lazy, I can do it." It's like, "Oh, but what if you were?" Because in
yeah.
that, like, sometimes laziness is just like an acknowledgement that you have finite hours in your day, and it's only laziness if you say, I want to use those, if you, I want to use an extra 2 hours to like lie on my couch and eat a pizza. But like nobody would say you're lazy for spending those extra 2 hours taking care of your children, right? So it's
True.
just, if
It's
you
true.
if you reframe it as I only have finite hours in the day, that is one thing. But when you said like, oh, aside from that emotional heaviness, I think for me, obviously mileage will vary for different people, but for me, that emotional heaviness was the thing to address
Yeah.
because I could find, like, I could see that it was starting to affect my relationships with my team, that I was
Yeah.
starting to feel to feel trapped in this sort of pseudo parental role that I thought I was supposed to coach you and, be a mentor, be like, show you how to make the most of your career. And somehow we've devolved into me just giving you a lecture on how to use the system. And this is not serving either of us.
Yeah.
And as a manager, like I said, in the beginning, when I transitioned into management, suddenly it became my job to talk to people, to help people. So those relationships that I have with people, they are the thing. It's not like a thing on the side, but they are the main thing that is my job.
Yeah.
So if those relationships are compromised because we're spending so much time talking about stuff that's not helping us do our best work, then I think that's worth investing in because it was robbing me of so much emotional energy that I then couldn't spend on coaching people through a difficult time or creating a psychologically safe space because I had already come in heavy with this kind of, oh, you must do this, you must do that. You don't trust the person who keeps yelling at you for not
Yeah.
throwing information into the black hole the way they went, right? So for me, that emotional heaviness and that like these like anxious spirals of do I ask them or do I just do it myself? In the end, they were robbing me of enough energy that's in part that became the fuel for this work.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I mean, what I'm getting is that considering, when you're evaluating the cost of the process done like manually by you versus automating it, what you should consider is not just your time, it's this whole basket of things that happen and the consequences on your relationships and the
Yeah.
consequences on your mental state for the rest of the day or the hour, and which is which might be way more impactful than just the 5 minutes you spend at doing the thing.
Yes, yes, exactly. I think in my talk I was thinking about, like really take a long, hard look at what is the biggest contribution that you're making? What is the most impactful work that you're making? And for me, it was the relationship aspect. For other people, it will be different things, but that's sort of what I walked away with for myself, that it it doesn't matter if the task sounds really dumb and really trivial. If it's getting in the way of that most impactful work, then it's worth automating or it's worth improving, even if it sounds silly.
So I totally agree. And I have one final question, that is, we have talked about one process specifically in your example, but obviously you've seen many different situations, many different processes. If you're a manager looking to streamline some process in their team, are there some like usual suspects in your experience of situations that are ripe for automation and that benefit the most from this kind of structuring?
Yeah, and I remember when we were preparing for this, you also had a note on like AI and where
Yeah,
does AI come in to help with the grunt work.
yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
right, there's I think I think this is relevant, and this sort of process thinking is still helpful and relevant in like the age of AI, whenever you have a situation where information is in people's heads and you need it to get out of the heads and into a format that you can consume. Maybe even more in the age of AI, where only what's out and visible to the AI can be leveraged. So
Yeah,
nobody's actually come to me and said, like, does all of this still matter when you can just use AI? And like, the AI can't look into my engineer's head and see when they want
yeah,
to ship the feature, right? So I think but I think that that's probably the thing that's worth thinking about. Like, what other pieces of information only exist in people's heads, whether that's, institutional knowledge that you want to get out of people's heads and into a system, whether it's feedback. Ideally, we're all giving each other feedback all the time to help each other grow, but it's an unpleasant task,
yeah,
and sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm asked for feedback, but I don't know how it's used and where it's going. And, obviously giving feedback doesn't feel
yeah,
like Jira, but it's still something that is where there's information that's in people's heads and you want to get it out. So I think that's probably the things that are ripe for revisiting process and revisiting how you try and get people to do the thing, because it's all about behavioral change, not about saving time. Like, yes, once people change their behavior and they actually use the system, it will save you time. But ultimately, I think you want people to change their behavior in a way to save emotional energy, to save
yeah,
time, to free you up for higher leverage activities.
yeah,
So I think that's the thing that feels most promising to go after, getting people
yeah.
to make really small tweaks to their day to day.
Yeah, so don't look at time directly, but saving time is a byproduct of making people spend their energy and effort on the things that they are the most capable for and the most suited
Yes,
for. Yeah,
yes, yes, exactly.
agree, totally agree. So thank you so much, Antonia, for the great chat, and thank you again for coming to the show.
Thank you so, so much. I'm so glad we got to talk about this. Like I told you earlier, so many times people were like, for the love of God, will you shut up about your Jira automations? And it's like, I'm still reeling from the, tell me more about your Jira
Tell me more. Exactly. You can point them to this episode now. Yes. I
automation.
went to a podcast to talk just about this.
That's right. And
Yes.
they're like, oh, thank God you're not talking to me about it anymore. You found somebody who wants to listen.
Yeah, you can point them and instead of telling them over and over, you just make them watch the episode. Yeah. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Well, thank you so, so much, Luca. Pretty, pretty lovely chatting with you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.